Welcome back then, folks, to day one, of course, of Special Projects Pack 15, build number 2 in particular. Earlier on we did the Mitsubishi FQ400 replica, this time a car which some of you may have raised an eyebrow at, because a lot of you, especially Unsung Heroes fans, will be familiar with brands like Koenig Specials. No relation to Koenigsegg, it's a German brand, founded, if I recall, by Willy Koenig, who's a racing driver, very good at what he does, especially when it comes to Ferraris, but he would modify his Ferraris, much to the chagrin of Enzo. He would make these crazy, like 800 horsepower Testarossas with wide body kits, crazy stuff. And also, more importantly, they were properly quick. They weren't just posers pieces. This is not a real car. And I think some of you have probably guessed that. It's my what if kind of imagination of what if Willy Koenig had got his hands on a Mitsubishi GTO and kind of applied his mental approach to that. Because in Japan, there's a lot of love for stuff like Koenig Specials in a similar way to the RWB Porsches, that kind of crazy wide-body reimagining of supercars and stuff. The Mitsubishi is kind of like a Japanese super sports car, or a sports car of its time as well, tons of tech. And I imagine the story here being a combination of two things. Imagine if he just decided to apply his tech and his, well, not his tech, his approach, his kind of tuning to a Mitsubishi to see what it could do, with, as I named it, the GT8, a V8 engine swap into I almost said Pontiac GTO, into a Mitsubishi GTO. But also, I imagine this as being Willy Koenig's angry response to the Callaway Sledgehammer. Seeing a Callaway Sledgehammer Corvette with 880 horsepower doing 255 miles an hour, and he thought, you know what, I bet I could do better than that. So we built a Mitsubishi with a V8 swap, 1,000 horses, and was however quick. Obviously, none of that happened, but that's kind of the headcanon that I have for this particular car. So it's a bit convoluted, but hey, you got to have fun sometimes with special projects, especially fictional ones. Of course, it's pretty obvious I did the livery for this one myself, so love it or hate it, I wanted to go for those very garish kind of 80s colour schemes with champagne and bright red. You know, each to their own, you might not like it, but hey, there it is. As far as the build, of course you do want the Hellcat motor swap on this one. The Demon Challenger in particular. As you can tell, we're not running peak horsepower on it, but it is pretty high. And for full exposure, there are some parts, which I've got on the car, which you don't need, because I initially just built it as a speed build, and then I had this idea and reworked the car into something else. But you'll see that as we work along. So you want your stage 1 weight. I don't think there's the ultimate section, yeah, just to double check on that one. So stage 1 weight. We've got comfort hards, we've got sports hards already fitted, etc. The tyres are down to you. I wanted it to feel like it had that road car vibe, a crazy road car, so I've got the sports hards fitted. As far as the club sports section, bored out the engine. As far as the weight, of course, stage 2 is fitted, power restrictor and ballast as well. For the semi-racing stuff, we've got the racing crank, ECU, the semi-racing silencer. That is actually the one you want to fit, because the racing one goes to a single pipe, which I'm really not a fan of the look of that, so I've gone for the twin pipe, which also gets us a little bit less power, which is what I wanted anyway. We've got the limited slip diff, stage 3 weight as well. As far as the racing stuff, polished ports, balanced tuning, the high-end supercharger, intercooler, air intake. Like I said, I'm not actually using the race silencer, so you don't need that. The manifold, the pads, the suspension, clutch and flywheel, of course, the center diff, the fully customized transmission, more like Tiptronic style, and then for the extreme stuff, like I said down here, I've got those racing tyres as well, but you don't need that for this build. For the extreme stuff, the steering angle adapter, likewise with NOS, like I said, you don't need that for this either, and the carbon ceramic brakes for more of that kind of supercar look and vibe. And then for the ultimate section, as you saw earlier on, titanium rods and pistons, and, because why not, the carbon prop shaft. So as you can see on sports tyres at least, it's actually significantly lower than 700 points, about 675, with a hair under 1,000 horsepower, and probably more weight than you'd be expecting, given how much weight loss we did. The reason for that is because I went for full weight loss, and then used the ballast to bring up to a more realistic weight, and have a better weight distribution. So if we jump into the setting side of things to show you what I mean, it's a 52-48 split. So I imagine, again, this version is where he's done that V8 swap. Of course, it's a supercharged V8. Of course, the Hellcat didn't exist back then, but just use your imagination for what V8 it would have been, maybe a Corvette motor or whatever. But he's fitted the engine as far back as it can go, like Maserati Quattroporte style, right up behind the dash, to improve the weight distribution. And because the engine is heavier than the standard Mitsubishi one, it has more of an effect on bringing that closer to the centre. So that's at least my headcanon once again. As far as the suspension, we've got 100mm on the front, 105 on the back, 4 for the anti-roll, 33 and 44 for the dampers. Fairly high on the springs, that should also be 2.95, front and back. As far as the camber, 1 degree front, half a degree on the rear. As far as toe, 0.15 in on the front, which of course helps the turn in. Just a little bit of toe in on the back for stability, 0.5. As far as the diff, it's a little bit all over the place. You'll have to give this a try and see what you think. It goes without saying, this car, even with four-wheel drive, it is a handful, because I wanted it to feel like that kind of crazy 80s, supercar vibe, so that suits it down to a T. We've got 30-10, 60-60, and then 30-10 again, and then a 50-50 torque split. So, pretty crazy. Give it a try and see what you think, of course. The nitrous is fitted, but you may as well take that off because it's not being used. For the transmission, I've actually made the crazy choice to leave it standard, because although I had the racer one fitted, which of course you can use if you want to, I kind of like the idea of leaving that standard one in there, because it has, long enough gears anyway. You can see if you go to the manual adjustment, 5th gear is geared to 334 miles an hour anyway, so even if it doesn't actually do that, that's more than quick enough. I like the fact that it's that just raw, old school, almost laggy kind of 5-speed, which to me feels appropriate to the car anyway. Having the race transmission is a nice option though, which is why I kept it, or why I fitted it I should say. So again, it's down to you what kind of vibe you want the car to have. As far as the restrictor, of course those are untouched. For the weight, 197 kilos, brings us up to 1480. I do, as I said, envision it as being fairly stripped out with that V8 swap, so I think 1480 is quite believable. A V8, although sometimes heavier, they don't necessarily have to be the heaviest thing in the world. Some V8s weigh less than you'd think. In fact, quite a few of them do, especially more modern ones. And to me, like I said, 1480, that sounds quite reasonable. About 1500 kilos isn't too crazy, even by 80s and 90s standards. We've got no downforce. You do, you can adjust it on the front if you want to. Again, I wanted the raw feel. And over here, all the other stuff is fitted, as we did. So crazy specs, presumably crazy to drive. And to answer that question, well, let's go out to the Nürburgring GP course to find out. Well, crazy it is, but in a different way to what a car like this would usually be. If you were to, for example, compare driving this to what an actual Callaway Sledgehammer would feel like in this game, well, I feel like the Callaway might be more challenging, because 880 horses going through the rear wheels versus 1000 horsepower going through all four. That's not to say that this car isn't a handful, though. In particular, you will definitely feel the weight of the car. A 1.5 tons is still a significant amount of weight, especially when the brakes only feel just about good enough to slow it down. So my biggest advice on this, especially if you use it on a track like here on the GP course, where you wind up that performance really quick and then have to really slow down for like hairpins and stuff, brake earlier than you think you need to. So don't wait for the marker to flash, brake before that point, because trust me, you'll need to. In terms of handling, well, it's about as heavy as you'd expect, especially with a 50-50 split. Again, I wanted it to have that kind of feel. It's not the kind of car which should be necessarily slip-sliding all over the place, but if you do really power it out of a corner, you can get that 1000 horsepower at the end of the day to really kick the back end out a little bit and use that to your advantage. I would encourage you to power slide the car because it can help you through a corner, especially help you with corner exit rather than having any understeer. The understeer isn't a bad thing because to me, like I said, it feels more authentic to what a car like this from this era should feel like, with this kind of crazy power and swap and all that. But yeah, it's just a totally out there, completely oddball, crazy what-if build, like I said, from a company that somehow is just as crazy as this in real life, just happened to not be with this particular car. So of course, if you do decide to use it, I hope you enjoy it. Check it out for racing, I guess, if you want to have a bit more of a challenge, and of course stick around for the rest of pack number 15 in the rest of the week. But for now, thanks for watching.